Let me reintroduce myself. I am Karen Lisko, and I actually talk to jurors for a living. And part of what I do is study decision making. So it's been fascinating to watch you as jurors in this experience. And it's especially interesting because, as you know, this is an online experiment. So the fact that you have volunteered your time to us and been so vocal is already made us a lot smarter. So thank you for that. I may get interrupted in a few minutes because we do want to ask you to fill out a very, very short questionnaire to get your individual views. But in the interest of time, does everybody have their phone muted? No problem. It happens. So in the interest of time, what I want to do is go ahead and start with some questions to you. One of the things that often happens, you've been in a lot of small groups in your lifetime, that you know is that when one person weighs in and others don't, it sounds like everybody agrees. And you may not. So please don't be shy. As a matter of fact, I've gotten to watch you from behind the scenes, so I have a feeling this group will not be shy. And that's a good thing. So please chime in if you agree or disagree with what we're talking about. Now, normally we would be talking about what you think about the witnesses, the case, the pile of dirt on the floor, but this interview is meant to talk to you about the format of the online process. So I'm going to narrow my questions about that. And I want to take you back many years ago to yesterday and ask you, when you think about your online experience yesterday, what would you say stands out the most?
Exhausting.
Why do you say exhausting?
Because it's frustrating to not be able to get it to do what you want, and that is exhausting for me. I was exhausted when we were done, and I was very frustrated.
Okay, thank you for that. Juror 26?
I've been using Zoom for all my online classes. And I mean, there are lecture halls with like hundreds of students and they work perfectly fine. So when we switched to Adobe Connect, when we used Adobe Connect yesterday, I was a little bit weirded out because it was pretty bad. It was a bad experience. The video quality sucked even more. It kept stopping. It was a lot of lag. So if someone was speaking, it wouldn't show their face until, I don't know, minutes after. And so Zoom is a lot more reliable, at least from this experience, as my past experiences, because it's pretty, the lag isn't too bad. Like if I move, you see it like, I don't know, half a second after.
Right.
And you have more, I guess, like you can customize it more. The evidence was brought up way more smoother. And nothing else has changed. I mean, we've been using the same internet. I'm assuming all of us have, right? Same computer, same device. So the problem was Adobe Connect, not on our end.
So. Okay, well, thank you for also bridging to today. I'm going to come back to today in just a second. Other reactions to yesterday of what stood out? Yes, sure, 15.
I also just thought it was difficult to have to be on the phone and on the computer yesterday. Just having to use both of those while it was, you know, it was nice I could mute my phone and walk away from the computer when it wasn't our kind of jury's turn to be asked questions. But I thought it was just difficult to have to be on both pieces of technology at the same time.
Okay, juror 33.
I don't want to sound too harsh.
We can take it, be blunt.
I think you guys should have been more prepared with what technical lackings you had. That was, to me, clearly an internet overload kind of thing. Your network wasn't able to handle the traffic you were putting through it.
Right.
And frankly, you should have known that before you did it. Now, I was amazed with how fast you reacted and changed your platform. So I give you a whole bunch of points with that. Kicking Adobe out of this and putting in Zoom was definitely the right choice. But, you know, maybe there is some prep you can do loading the network before with false data. There's a way you can load a network to see what the reaction speed is. And your provider should have been able to do that for you before you got 100 people together to
waste
your time.
All right, thank you for that. I'm actually going to see before we leave yesterday and come to today, was there anything that went well yesterday? Yes, juror 13.
I think it's interesting because trials and the whole process of the trial can seem very formal and very impersonal, but because and this is going to come out weird, but because we're all facing each other and looking at one another, it seems like there is an extended level of connection that you don't experience in the courtroom. And you get to know each other in another way, whereas in the courtroom, you're all sitting face forward and, you know, just looking straight ahead. Right. So I think that there is a newfound level of connection that you wouldn't find in a brick and mortar courtroom. So I actually found that to be very enlightening.
Thanks for that. And it bridges well to another question I want to ask. So let me take what you just said, Juror 13, and expand it to the full group. How many of you have been actual jurors in a real courtroom before yesterday? Just by show of hands. Okay, so whether you have or haven't, I want to follow up on Juror 13's statement, because that is something we are interested in right this minute. We're studying this nationwide. And so one of the things people are wondering about is, will jurors in this remote setting feel more connected or less connected? So in a broad question, first of all, to those of you who've been a juror before, so I just want to talk to those of you who just raised your hand. How many of you would say you felt more connected in this forum than you did in a real courtroom? 2, 3, hands up. Okay, so how many of you felt less connected?
Maybe I need to ask you what you mean by connected. I would never want to have my trial with what we've experienced in the last 24 hours.
Okay, so let me just talk about more connected to the trial process.
Yeah.
I think the original part, until we got into the jury room, I feel a lot more connection. And even like to the witnesses, because you're right there.
Okay.
You can really see their expressions. You can really, but you know, when in the trial that I took part in, when we moved into the jury room, then you were face to face. But still, it wasn't a negative at all.
Okay, good. Okay, Juror 21.
Well, the one thing that I found most helpful in this format was that you all allowed me to bring a pencil and paper in and take notes. The other jury I was on, we were just sitting there listening all day long and then trusting to judgment. I mean, number 13, I had notes. Many of us had notes that we were referring back to, and it was not just our memory. So,
and that can be very jurisdiction specific. Certain courts in certain states allow notes, certain ones do not.
Oh,
so
okay.
they would probably still follow a similar format to what they've been doing whatever state you're in. As you know, you're a national group. This is unprecedented that we have a nationwide jury. So that's another reason this is cool.
But I did find that extremely helpful.
Okay, that's good to hear. All right, I'm going to move along. So apologies if it feels like I'm cutting you off at any point, but I have way more questions than we have time.
And actually, Karen, I'm going to break in because we do have in the chat box now the links to the 2 questionnaires that we would like the jurors to fill out. Would you prefer to continue with your questions, or would you like the jurors to complete those questionnaires now? I will leave it to your discretion.
Okay, Sarah, I think at this point, what we'll do is at the end of this, we'll post those questionnaires and ask jurors if they'd be willing to complete them then. Okay.
All right, it's fine. The links are in the chat, which we've asked the jurors not to use throughout the trial. But at this point, now that the trial is formally over and we're in the debriefing phase, once Karen Lisko directs you to do so, you can go to the chat, and it should be the chat at the very bottom. There'll be 2 links. The questionnaires are short. They should only take a total of about 5 to 7 minutes to complete the both of them. And they ask separately about day 1 and day 2, since we did use different platforms. Thank you.
Sarah, the other thing I'll update you about that you might not have seen in our email exchanges is that Richard Gabriel is going to wrap things up at 5 minutes till the hour. So
Noted
just-
the times
I
noted.
hope you leave those questionnaires up a few minutes after. the
We can do
official
that. Yep,
Yeah.
we can do that.
'Cause
No
we're not-
problem. So for now, if you don't mind just staying in the interview portion, and then we'll give you time for those questionnaires. All right, so let's talk about today. As you know, we joined in Zoom, and as Juror 26 already pointed out, there was quite a bit of difference, but I'm curious what that looked like for you. In other words, now you're an experiment of having seen yesterday versus today. So what would you say was the biggest change from yesterday to today and what you saw? Juror 38, can I start with you?
Yes, today just seemed to go a lot smoother. You know, yesterday seemed a bit more glitchy
Okay.
than today was. I was able to hear people. Wasn't much lag. It was a little, but if I had to recommend a platform, it would definitely be Zoom all day.
Okay. All right. Now, who has used Zoom before? Oh, wow. Okay, a number of folks. So I'm going to talk to some of the folks who did not raise their hand. So Juror 22, what was today's experience like for you?
I was much improved. For one thing, like Juror 15 mentioned, not having to have the phone and then the computer and then worry about the phone running out of charge. And also the downtime. There wasn't downtime like there was yesterday, where it was just dead space.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Juror 24, how about you? You said you haven't used Zoom before. So how was today's experience for you?
Like 22 said, I liked the no phone. I think that there was less lag, and I think that the layout is just easier to figure things out than Adobe.
Did you, and this is to the whole group, thanks, Juror 24. To the whole group, were there still things that were problematic today with the platform? Yes, Juror 15.
I think if you didn't know how to update your speaker settings and things like that, that gets a little confusing of like gallery view versus speaker view. And if screens are being shared, how do you still see the speakers?
Okay.
So, I mean, I already knew how to do that, but I could see how that would be a confusing point if you didn't know how to change those things.
Okay.
It's not necessarily obvious on the Zoom app.
Okay. Other quick thoughts? Anything
When
that could have been improved?
When they asked us to get off of gallery view so that we saw the person large on one side and its strip on the other, on my screen, I could see the woman attorney, but when the male attorney, and Mr. Friedling, I think is his name, Friedenthal, he was not on the same time. So I had to switch back to gallery view so I could see him.
Oh, did anybody else have to do that?
Well, there was something weird that happened at the very beginning there. I didn't touch my keyboard or mouse,
Right.
and the view changed.
I saw that.
And that's what I think threw me off.
Okay.
You know, and then trying to figure out what it was supposed to be. Exactly what 15 said. It just wasn't. Can I throw one other thing out? These chat thing, when somebody chats in the background, I keep getting this little dialogue box that comes up that says who's speaking to who, and like the first sentence. Every time somebody posts something new, and it's like a little alert, you have a chat. Is there something about the way my Zoom is set up, or?
I don't know. I think a lot of people saw that, right?
15, you didn't see that?
Somehow I think you're going to have to be able to turn that off when the jury's in the jury room.
I found it very, very, if nobody else saw it, it's something I did wrong. But it was very, very, you know, it's hard to concentrate when this thing kept popping up.
I would think in an actual trial if Zoom was being used, chat would be disabled.
That is exactly what we need.
Right.
People watching and talking to each other.
You're exactly right, Juror 15. I mean, part of it is you had an experiment overlaying a trial.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so a question again comparing yesterday to today. And I want to ask you about your impression of the judge and the attorneys. Did your impression of their professionalism shift in any way from how you saw them yesterday versus to today?
No.
Juror 9?
I think for me, it's pretty easy to distinguish a technical issue versus another issue. So I think we got a clear sense of them yesterday in terms of their professionalism and their people independent of any technology glitches. So for me, it was easier to view them and they weren't freezing up, which I think is really important when you want to see facial expressions in presentations. But knowing that that was just a technical issue, it was easy to forgive that in terms of, you know, dealing with the attorneys and the judge.
Okay. Anybody else who had something to say? Because I'm going to add a part to that question. Juror 13?
I agree with number 9. The only thing about yesterday is, and it didn't take away from their professionalism at all. I had this empathy factor at any time, like any of the things froze up. And so then that was the only thing that took me out, is then I was thinking, oh, I feel so badly for them because this is their exhibit and they want to show something and they're not able to show it. And it didn't reflect on their professionalism whatsoever. But then I was thinking about that rather than, that's all.
Okay, fair enough. Juror 15.
I think actually the exact opposite of the empathy thing. Even though I know it's technical issues and that things happen, for me, it's just subconsciously, if I see someone having technical issues on a platform that I feel like I can use, there's just something that's like, oh, okay, maybe you don't know what you're doing.
Okay.
And that's probably just me personally and something that I need to fight and work against. But I do think, you know, if one side is having more technical issues than the other side, there might be a subconscious thing there that happens.
That's very fair. Now, one of the differences today is, did you notice they use different backgrounds?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons behind my question. We wanted to know if anybody would bring that up on their own.
Yeah, I was.
There seems to be a love-hate relationship with these Zoom backgrounds. People either love them or hate them, or you might be in between. So what were your reactions? Like Juror 26, if I could ask you, what did you first of all notice they were using different backgrounds today?
I mean, there's pros and cons. Like I had a class that had 156 students in it. And so they would use silly backgrounds, space, aquariums, the beach, Cancun, Canada, whatever, mountains. And so I think it can be a little bit distracting. I think just a plain background would be fair.
Okay.
I guess it gave like a false sense of being in court. At least they had very similar backgrounds, so we weren't like judging them based on it. But to me, I'm okay with my window and stuff.
Well, actually, and I want to ask that to folks, if you knew you had an option as a juror for a background, because this is being considered as well nationwide, that you could have a uniform background for each of you.
Yeah.
How many of you would be in favor of that by a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4. And how many would not want that?
This is no time to be showing your personality.
Okay, but Juror 19 has a different thought. Juror, what do you think, Juror 19?
I just like the personalities.
You like to see it?
Whatever. And I thought, by the way, that the Golden Gate Bridge was really over the top.
Okay, great. All right. In the interest of time, we only have 5 minutes left talking with each other before Richard Gabriel comes on to give concluding remarks and have you go through the questionnaire. If you were asked, and I'm not asking this, but if you knew there was an online trial next month, how was this experience in terms of motivating you or demotivating you from doing this again under these circumstances? And I'm not talking about length of time, I'm talking more about the platform. If you were looking at doing an online versus an in-person jury experience, how many of you would say, I could see being an online juror again? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Everybody. Did everybody raise their hand? Okay, well, that's encouraging. Okay. Now, we've gone a little haphazardly throughout the phases of the case. I'm going to read them to you rapid fire and ask you to chime in if there's something that stood out to you about the online approach with any of these phases. Started with jury selection, the judge's instructions, both preliminary and right before deliberations, opening statements, witness testimony, viewing exhibits, closing arguments, deliberations. Anything of that list that I just ran quickly through that stood out to you in terms of a good or a bad impression you had of that online factor? Yes, Juror 21.
Well, I think having been on a jury before, that doing it online and people having to raise their hands as you vote, in a jury room, normally you can do a paper pencil thing and you don't know how people are voting. Sometimes that's important, and maybe some other cases it would not be important.
Okay.
But I know if we were forced to stay online until we had gotten 9 people one way or the other, I don't know how being far away in terms of, if coercion is the right word, how to help someone change their mind to your point of view. Does that make sense?
Yes.
When you're in a group of people.
Also, when you do change your mind anonymously, I think that that's easier than changing it publicly.
Once everyone has seen your vote.
Okay.
Yeah, once everybody's seen your vote, you're basically, a lot of people don't want to admit that they're changing their minds.
Okay.
Right. So I think that is something that really needs to be considered.
Okay, thank you. Juror 27, anything that stood out in the list of phases of the trial that I just read to you?
Just going based off what Juror 21 and 33 were talking about, there is obviously, you guys would have to dive into it and whatnot with the tech people, but there is a way on Zoom to do a poll, so that would be anonymously. I don't know if only the host can do that, or if in the breakout rooms the person in charge would be able to do that. I don't know exactly how that works, but I have experienced that, so maybe that can be looked into, to it being, the vote being done anonymously.
Okay, thank you. All right, so yes, Juror 15.
Just with the voir dire, I'm probably not saying that right. I think, jury duty is a lot of sit around and wait when they're first choosing the jury. But I think the online platform maybe provides something where you could say, okay, this group of people, you're going to log on for this 20 minutes. And then the next group of people can log on for this 20 minutes until we get a full jury. Because you have the opportunity to not have everybody have to be in a waiting room.
Okay, that's interesting. All right. What else have I not asked you that I should be asking you? Oh, looks like we're being joined by the other jury. Perfect timing. Hey, Ken.
Thank you, Karen.
Sure. Thanks, everybody, for your great input. So